everybody. This is Alberto Kennedy, aka Grimoire. This video is going to be discussing or talking about altars. What are they for? What are they, right? This question, what are altars, came to me by way of one of my longtime friends via Facebook. His name is Sammy Espinosa. So this one's for you, Sammy. Let's get started. It's a lot of information, and I have my info right here. What are altars? When you think about altars, you think, oh my goodness, the scary movies, they come up and they're all, dark and there's a lot dripping wax, melted wax all over it and skulls and everything. What is it for? Is it just, shock value? No. There's a reason why altars are, there's a reason why altars are, right? And let me get into that. Before I talk about altars, though, these are some terms that you want to be familiar with. Sacred space. What's that? An area, location, or region that is christened, blessed, or made sacred for a spirit or for spiritual purposes. A meditation room, a burial ground, cemeteries, a church, a temple, or religious site, or spiritual site, or a site that you feel comfortable and safe in. That's a sacred space. And it's a place where dimensions, consciousness, and power become one. A spiritual battery. Specifically, in spiritual and magical terms, a battery is a source of energy that empowers a person, place, or thing. A spiritual portal. A spiritual portal is a gateway or nexus point that is connected to multiple dimensions. A magic worker or spiritual practitioner will always be able to create portals and close them. Closing a portal is just as important as opening one. It's a built-in innate ability that most magical workers have, psychics have, empaths have. If you are psychic, if you are an adept practitioner, somebody who's a professional, who has years of experience in the magical field, occultal field, spiritual field, psychic field, then naturally you have the ability to open and close portals. Well, how does these terms that I just went into detail about figure in with an altar? Well, it's important. Remember this. An altar is a sacred space, a battery, and a portal all in one. That's freaking huge, right? Let me go into detail. It's a sacred space or platform where the spiritual worlds and the physical worlds meet. It's a console mechanism that controls and focuses spiritual and interdimensional energy. An altar is a nexus point, portal, and doorway. It's a shrine and sacred table where offerings, candles, symbols, effigies of beings you work with, your ancestors, where you connect with all of them, and where you place symbolic statuettes or figurines or symbols attributed to these entities that you work with, or the energies that you work with. Some people don't work with entities. Some people just work with energies. But you want a symbol of the energies you work with on your altar, to christen your altar and to focus your altar towards that type of energy, towards the energy that you're working with. Or for some people, entities, when you're working with entities. You want figurines or symbols. And they're to be placed on the altar. An altar is a gateway. It augments your personal power and the powers you work with. It amplifies your connection to other worlds, other times, other beings, other powers, especially your ancestors and spirit guides. And so that's what an altar is for, is to connect you to the spiritual worlds. Not just one world, it's worlds, Not every entity is on the same plane of existence. All right. You can make temporary altars, mobile altars, or permanent altars. What does that mean? A temporary altar is, for example, I have a permanent altar, but on top of my permanent altar, I have a mirror plate. And this mirror plate, it's the centerpiece in my altar. But sometimes if I go out of town or whatnot, I take the center plate, the mirror, with me. So that way that serves as my portable altar. So I can dress it up. I can write my symbols on it. I can do my work on top of that altar wherever I go. So that's a temporary altar or a mobile altar. A temporary altar, for example, if you're working a spell with an entity that you have been courting, which means you've offered them something, you've connected with them, you've researched them, and you're going to work with them. But this entity is not a permanent entity or an entity that you work with on a consistent basis, even though you respect and hopefully you do respect that entity and whatnot. Well, you set up a temporary altar in some place in your home, in your room, or wherever, even outside. You can do it outside. A temporary altar works great for outdoors, and you set it up with your offering, your symbol of that entity, a symbol of your unity with that entity. I would, I work with, and most altars do, incorporate the 4 elements, or 5 elements if you're Wiccan. The 4 elements: fire, water, earth, air. There's a 5th element for Wiccans, which is wood. Some would say metal. Others would say metal. I incorporate the 4 elements as well as the 8 universal elements. And that would be more so in high magic. High magic and regular magic are different in the sense that you can work with terrestrial elements. Most witchcraft and magical systems work with terrestrial elements, which that's fine. I love it. I work with them too. However, I like to incorporate universal elements. The universal elements: time, space, distance, matter, light, dark, death, life. You can go even further and say spirit. The energy of spirit is an element in of itself you can use as well. I incorporate these things in the altar. Most people do, maybe not the 8 elements, but definitely the 4 elements. And you have symbols of the 4 elements: a chalice for water, a candle for fire, a feather or athame for air, a stone or crystal for earth. It works. A piece of wood, a sacred figurine made out of wood, for wood, if you're so inclined with the 5th element of wood, or a magnet or metal of some sort for the element of metal. So it's really up to you, and you get to use your artistic creativity to express your connection with the spirit world when you create an altar. Things to remember. Okay, get out of there. 1 second. Okay. Note, I forget this sometimes. The more you work with your altar, the more it'll get cluttered over a period of time. So you want to remember to periodically clean your altar, because since your altar is a physical symbol of your connection to the spirit worlds, to the entities, to the beings that you are invoking and working with, you want to keep your connection as clean as possible. And so that when you clean your altar, if you work with your altar a lot, you develop a symbiotic connection with your altar, right? And so if you are cluttered inside, so too will be your altar. If you cleanse your altar, clean your altar and whatnot, rearrange things, make it clean and whatnot, you're kind of doing that. It's like a ritual in of itself, because you're also cleaning your internals and your connection to the spirit and connection to the entities that you work with. Before you create an altar, many people say, oh, great, I'm going to make an altar. Well, why? What's your agenda? What's your motives for creating an altar? Some people just want to create an altar because it looks pretty. Fine, go do you. Be careful though, because the altar is a doorway. And if you have a doorway that's open, you have to have filters in it, and I'll get to that. Okay, incorporate filters. There you go. The 4 or 5 elements should be present. those are filters in of themselves, you know, because the elements are neutral. They are not positive or negative. They're neutral. So they neutralize any energies around or coming through. And it keeps it at a neutral charge. You want your altar in a neutral charge. You are the only one that will give it a polarity because it's an extension of you, your altar. So if you are working your magic in terms of defense, the overall theme of your altar for that ceremony, ritual, meditation, or whatever will be defense. And so you polarize your altar. But at all times, your altar should remain in neutral. It should have a neutral charge to it. You can, for example, if you incorporate the 8 elements, you want to use symbols in your altar. Put symbols. What's the symbol for time? A watch, or a figurine of an hourglass, or an actual hourglass. You can put, for time, distance, distance mostly. You can put a measuring stick or some kind of measuring implement. So, you know, it's up to your creativity to dress your altar and to create it and to make it as beautiful as possible because it is a symbol of your connection to the other side. Your altar should have symbols, tools that represent your magical tradition or traditions, if you work with plural, many traditions. And it should also reflect your knowledge and your wisdom. I have a little book of shadows on my altar. That I jot down my meditations, my dreams, certain spells that come to me or rituals that come to me, advice or knowledge from the entities that I work with that pops into my head while during working, or sometimes even when I'm sleeping and it comes up to me, I go to my altar and I write it down. So it's a book also shows knowledge and wisdom. It's a symbol of, and you can place that in your altar as well. These articles or these objects that you put in your altar are sacred. I have some pictures after this video that you can look at the different stages of my altar and the many different altars that I have had. They change because we change. As we evolve, we grow and we learn more, and we open our minds, our spirits, and our hearts to new paths, to new knowledge, wisdom, experiences, and whatnot. And so we obviously evolve. So too, you'll find that your altar will evolve as well. That's okay, you know. That's good. That's a good thing. This is my knowledge on what altars are about. There are many different types of altars. Some are scary and some are kind of dark because they deal with darker energies that I won't go into. But some are nice, you know, some are strong and powerful. Powerful and strong doesn't mean dark. For example, the symbol of a skull. When you see a skull in an altar, oh, they're working with death. No. They could be working with ancestors. They could be working with spirit. They could be working with the dead. The dead are not scary. You know, they used to be human. You know, so, well, keep that in mind. You know, a symbol may look dark, but your knowledge of a symbol is what dispels that darkness. Truth is a very powerful element in of itself in magical terms. You want to put that in your altar somewhere, truth. And whatever your symbol for truth is, you know, that's an excellent filter, by the way, for your altars. This is my knowledge that I present to you regarding altars. Nothing too cray, nothing too convoluted. It's pretty straightforward. Just keep in mind that an altar is a doorway. And you want to be mindful of that. You want to be careful and vigilant and set up your filters. When you create an altar, this is important, cleanse the area. Cleanse the table that you're working with. Make it a sacred space by cleansing it. And when you're cleansing it, you just let it know this is the area that I am going to do my magnum opus or great work, working with the entities, working with the spirits, working with my ancestors, remembering them, honoring my connection with them, and our mutual path to heal others, protect others, defend others. and evolve. Whatever you say, just cleanse it with herb sage, palo santo, agua florida, or whatever you use, whatever comes to you to use to cleanse your altar, your area that you're going to work. Make it a sacred space. And how you do it is with the herbs, but also with what you're saying, your intent, your focus. That's important. And so when you do that, when you cleanse the area, it's now ready for you to create an altar. However you decide to create it, using symbols, using little statues or figurines or objects, sacred objects that are meaningful to you. That's what you dress your altar with. And it's basically up to you on how you want your altar to look. How, it's your artistic creativity and your expression of your artistic creativity in your altar, Last but not least, one second, there we go. Okay. The placement of these symbols, sacred objects, and elements are entirely up to you and your creative expression. If you understand what an altar is, if you know who you are working with, research, and their symbols, and you know why you are creating one, there is no wrong way to set up an altar, especially if you know that it's a doorway you're setting up. Very similar, an altar's energy is very similar, but not the same, but very similar to a Ouija board. That's why it's like, be careful, because it's a doorway. However, the altar does have filters. The elements, universal elements, the objects that you put on there, the symbols that you put on there and that are meaningful to you, religious symbols, spiritual symbols, magical symbols, occult symbols, whatever you want to put on your altar, it's up to you. Go crazy. However, those are filters that prevent negativity from infiltrating. I work with a mirror, many mirrors. But behind those mirrors, you best believe I put the symbols behind the mirror, and sometimes on the mirror. Angelic sigils, Sumerian script, hieroglyphs, whatever I put in the back as a seal and as a filter to make sure no negativity can infiltrate. Because unfortunately, as there is positive, there is negative, and sometimes entities are kind of cray. And if they can infiltrate, they will. That's just how it is. Just like a house, sometimes there's people who are foolish enough to break in homes. There's some spirits that, get down like that. It's unfortunate, but a fact of the paranormal. So be diligent and cautious. And if you do create an altar, create filters, put in filters. And it can come from whatever tradition that you hail from. But this is what I have in terms of altars. I hope this helped. I hope people got a fresh look at that. Look at the pictures that I have at the end of this video. And get back to me if you have any questions that I didn't touch on with this video regarding altars. Okay. And I'm trying to bring light to dark places. I hope I did so with this video. I hope I answered your question, Sammy Espinosa. And much love and light. Let's bring it out. Let's bring the light out. This world definitely needs it, and we can do it. All right. Bye.